I guess welcome to Michigan for the people that haven't been here before. I am up in the northern part of Michigan. If we can, yeah, I guess we can see that. This kind of small print down here, but that's Detroit down here. I live up in the northern part of Michigan. It's a resort area where everybody comes to play, and I get to live here, and great place to live, and we love it here. All right. Now, one of the things that we wanted to accomplish was a little bit of beads, rolling beads. And so before I start into my hollow form, I just want to roll a few beads and just show you the methods of doing beads. And then we can make a hollow form out of this later. So I'm going to just chew this up. I'm going to lower my handle to a planing cutter if it was a skew, but I've got what's the difference between this edge here and a skew? The handle's in a different place. So I'm using this like a skew with my handle down and just going to clean this up, make a cylinder. Okay, so we can see the grain. This was a piece of close to where a crotch was, and so the grain is running kind of wacky, wavy in here, which is a good thing, not a bad thing. And so we're nice and clean here. Now, if we're going to roll a bead with a spindle gouge, there's a number of ways to do that. We can do a push cut where the bevel support, let me get a closer view of that. We got the bevel on first, anchor the bevel, the flute is pointing in the direction I'm going to travel, a 45-degree twist on it, and I'm going to get a cut happening, and I'm going to go forward, and I'm going to follow the bevel around, and I'm going to get down into the bottom. We got the bevel on first, anchor the bevel, the flute is pointing in the direction I'm going to travel, a 45-degree twist on it, and I'm going to get a cut happening, and I'm going to go forward, and I'm going to follow the bevel around, and I'm going to get down into the bottom. There, you can see that better. So I just made this curve here, and this is just a square fuzzed up edge on the other side. So I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Bevel support first, go in the opposite direction, and swing my handle and make the other side of the bead. Well, if we're making a relatively, there, you can see that better. So I just made this curve here, and this is just a square fuzzed up edge on the other side. So I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Bevel support first, go in the opposite direction, and swing my handle and make the other side of the bead. Well, if we're making a relatively big bead here, we can do that. We can just swing the handle, and the handle's got to go from you know, probably almost 2 feet of movement of the handle in order to make that arc. There's another way to do that is to, so I'm going to get my handle way down now and have my bevel support. My tool rest is a little bit too high, or too low. I'm going to raise it up just a hair. Okay. So I got my bevel support now underneath. Hope you can, yep, you can see that. Now I'm going to raise my handle until I get a little whisk of a shaving. Let me clean that off so you can see it. And the flute is pointing straight up into the sky. Okay, that's the top of my bead. I'm going to raise my handle till I get a little whisk of a shaving. Okay, now I'm going to roll my wrist and come around the corner. I don't have to swing my handle very much. I'm pretty much just rolling my wrist, pick up the bevel, and roll my wrist. Okay, pick up the bevel and roll my wrist. I come down into that corner. All right, so let's look at it from above. You can see now I got another bead that I rolled a whole different way. All right, now if the beads are relatively big, and we could do this on a big scale, like even Christmas ornament globes and things like that is just a bead. So those are achievable when the beads are relatively big. But what if I want to do tinier beads, smaller beads? I want to do a grouping of beads. There's a way to do that that is going down the side of a bead with a push cut, like I was just doing. You get in the bottom of the bead, and then you lower your handle and you come up the other side of the bead with a shear scrape, and then you go back down the other side of the bead again with a push cut. So it's a constant motion down the side of a bead with a push cut, like I was just doing. You get in the bottom of the bead, and then you lower your handle and you come up the other side of the bead with a shear scrape, and then you go back down the other side of the bead again with a push cut. So it's a constant motion. There's a flow that you get. It's up and down, up and down, up and down movement. Now let me show you the other camera so you can see what's happening to my handle. All right, so here's again, I'm down the bottom of that bead, my handle is up. I'm going to come up the other side, across the top, and back down again. So I got to get my handle down and back down again. So there's a pumping motion down the side of one bead and up the side of the next bead. Okay, so if we're making a bunch of smaller beads, that's a handy way to do it. Let's talk about other tools, I guess. You could use a skew to do these kinds of cuts too. It's a little more advanced in really understanding the skew. The key things to using a skew is to be using the points, not the middle part of the skew. You use the short point or the long point to roll beads with. There's another set of tools. I don't have them. I don't normally do these. I don't normally do beads. My aesthetics is more sweeping lines, smooth shapes. I don't do a lot of detail in my pieces, either bowls or hollow forms. I like to let the wood do the speaking, so to speak, and I don't do a lot of detail in them. But there are tools that you can get that are beading tools that have a kerf in them. They're a tool that's a scraping tool that's cut, you know, with a V in it. Well, when you just stick that into the wood, you're scraping. What I've been doing here is slicing. Slicing is going to be a cleaner cut than scraping is just tearing the fibers apart, especially when we're on a bowl format where you've got the end grain going around twice every rotation. But these are scraping cuts, and the area right at the apex is probably going to be a relatively clean cut, but the areas close to the bottom of the kerf between the beads is going to be pretty rough. It's going to be torn out grain, fuzz a little bit. And how are we going to sand in there between two beads? It's really tough, and then it starts to ruin the profile of the beads trying to sand them. So I would rather slice those fibers cleaner than try to scrape them and then sand the damage off. So there's lots of ways that you can do these. Let's go back to here. The trick here to making these look proud of the work is to prepare the surface in front or behind the beads to to make them look proud of the surface. So I can come in here and make this cut. So that now, and I clean that up. So now the beads look proud of the surface of the wood behind. You make the bead the same, but you just prepare the surface differently. Do the same thing here. Let's get rid of some of this wood first. I'm back to my bowl gouge. I could use a bowl gouge for the bead too, to get down into that corner. And then that separates the bead from the surface that you're working on. So you can even have the bead into the surface or standing out from the surface. But other than that, I don't know that there's a whole lot more that I can talk about beads. One of the things about beads or detail is the design elements around doing them. If we do them in a shape of a hollow form, you know, I could put a bead right at the rim. If I do that, maybe I want to put a bead at the bottom too, just to accentuate, just to give it something to relate to. If you want to put a bead right at the junction of a transition point, or at the largest diameter, sometimes there's a transition point, like in a goblet, between the globe and the stem, and you leave a little detail just part way up into the globe that just separates the stem from the globe a little bit, or you could put a little detail right in here just between the two. So depends on your aesthetics whether you like those kinds of things. We just had Matt Monaco. Matt's an amazing skilled turner. He's his tool control skills are off the chart, just amazing. It was just, you stand there watching him turn with your mouth open and says, whoa, this is so cool. But he does a lot of details in bowls, and he did some spinning tops, for instance. He had with double captured rings in it. And he had so much detail in that little piece. When he took it off and we got it out of the camera, looking at it, the whole thing wasn't much bigger than a thimble, an inch tall, and he had so much detail in there. I says, whoa, this is crazy. And it really looks fine. It looks nice, but it's not what I usually do. I don't usually do a lot of detail in my pieces. So, but if you want to do them, it's a matter of planning ahead of time so that you know whether you want the detail to be proud of the surface of the bowl or into the surface of the bowl. There's only three shapes. There's only three things that we need to make: concave, convex, and flat. Everything in the world is made from those three shapes. And so you can do details of flat, sharp corners. You can do details of rounded beads and flats combined, and all kinds of different coves and beads. What's an OG is a bead and a cove. Okay, so it's just mastering the techniques to do those three shapes. And many people like Cindy Drozda and some of the others, they use a very, very sharp angled tools. If I can find a place to see that, very sharp angled. This is probably about 20-degree angle, very, very steep and sharp to do the kind of detail they do. I don't usually do that kind of things. My interest isn't there, so don't do that much. If you want to do things like Cindy does with that very, very fine detail, and I think, you know, if it was me, I'd have to be wearing magnifying glasses to do that detail that she does. If you watch my Christmas ornament finial that I'm going to do, I'm going to do one that's going to be functional so that it doesn't have as much precise detail in it, and makes it a little bit easier to do. The detail that Cindy and some of these people use are just amazing, but achievable with some practice. It's not hard. I think, again, just planning ahead so that you know the surface area that you're going to work on, the balance of the piece involving the detail, whether, I mean, there's a certain amount where just when do you stop? How much detail do you add compared to the sweet lines of the bowl or vessel? So if you like the kind of teaching I do and the details that I get into, come back and see me again. Do me a favor, if you will, and talk about this on your Facebook page or to your club members. Put it in your newsletter that this stuff is available for a real reasonable price, and even the vendor showcase, even free events that we do, and point them in our direction. There's a lot of us that are doing this, Cindy and Todd and many of us around the country that are doing these remote demos, and so the resources there, that there's a lot of learning and a lot of fun, a lot of entertainment to be seen and watching people turn and do their thing. And there's so many different methods and techniques that you can never get tired of watching it. So promote it on your social media, if you will, and pass the good word that we're doing the job up here, and we'll see you in a few weeks.